Hello, everyone, and welcome to Authoritas Tea Time SEO, where we are encouraging everyone to take at least a 15-minute break to connect with connect with one another, and learn some great tips. I hope everyone's got their tea or coffee at the ready. Very good. So I'm SEO Joe Blogs, growth marketer here at Authoritas, and I'm joined by Carrie Shepherd.
Hi guys, it's good to see you all. And today Carrie. We have Chris, Andrew, and Marco. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
So yes, we have three great speakers talking and sharing their tips on SEO-friendly migrations. Thank you everyone for joining. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so please add your questions to the chat. We just also want to say hi to some people. We have Sarah. Hi Sarah, Lawrence, Mike, JP Sherman. We have Adriano. Hello Adriano from Italy. And yes, I will pass over for everyone to introduce themselves, and then we'll have Andrew give his top tips, followed by Chris and Marco.
Okay, I'll go first and introduce myself. Hello, I'm Andrew. My surname is Cock-Starkey, not Optimizy, but nobody can remember that, and it falls foul of lots of kind of people's spam and censor filters. So I'm known as Andrew Optimizy. That's the name of my consultancy that I run. I set up in January, so what a great time to start a new business, launching in January. But I'm going okay, and for about 20 odd years, for far too many more than that, I've been working in digital marketing, lots of different roles, now specializing in SEO. You may see me on Twitter. I spend far too much time on there, often talking about the SEO events that I run in Cambridge. So kind of like this, but remember the times when we could actually meet in person and talk about SEO rather than do it by webinars? It's kind of like that. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Cool. So I'm Chris. I'm head of marketing innovation at Footprint Digital, which means that I get involved with everything and no one understands my job title, which is kind of cool. I'm a certified trainer for Systrix. I'm an on-call ambassador, and just way too into tools in general, which is kind of cool. World lives on that. Speaker at various events, train people, teach, do all that kind of stuff. I often say that my job is pretty much pointing at graphs on screens. That is pretty much what I do. And then so co-creator on a few mad science experiments like hourly rank tracking, Edge SEO, and bits like that. And at the current moment, I'm largely busy running Helping Small Biz, which is effectively a free effort to help businesses that are suffering at the moment get online. That's my cheeky plug there. So
great. Thank you very much. Yeah, and yes, we'd like to hear also more about that at the end, and also Andrew for your meetup too. Over to you, Marco.
Hello, hi, I guess it's my turn. My name is Marco, so I've been working in SEO for 5 years, and currently I'm working for a big agency called Mediacom. I'm taking care of pretty much e-commerce, I would say. E-commerce, recruitment, Google for Jobs, these kind of websites. And in the past few years, I also started to do some like public speaking. And in the past couple of years, especially I do the previous year, last year, and this year for Brighton SEO as well. That's me.
Thank you. Over to you, Andrew, for your top tips.
Great. Thanks, Joe. So I've prepared lots of things beginning with P for the 5 Ps. It's 6 Ps, but then Joe has just informed me that I couldn't swear, so I had to reduce it to 5 Ps. But the 5 Ps, proper planning prevents, insert word beginning with P here, poor performance. So basically, when you're going to do a site migration, it's like moving house or getting married or a loved one dying, and it's one of the most stressful things you'll go through. We were doing a bit of a chat beforehand about how many migrations each of us have done. Chris has done a ridiculous amount. I can't believe he's not completely grey. Doing site migrations is hard. So if you're building up to doing a site migration, plan everything. Checklists are your friend. I mean, people take the mickey out of me because I write checklists for literally everything, just lists and lists and lists with little tick boxes and all this kind of stuff. One of those might save your life when you're planning site migrations. some of the things, so I wanted to think about and talk about some of the site migrations I've been through recently, but it's just a checklist will help you stop embarrassing yourself. Like you'll miss things, really obvious things, like when people do site migrations, they plan it all lovely, great, and everything's work, and they forget to put the tracking code on. So Google Analytics, and they look at it after the site and they're, oh, how did our site migration go? And nobody knows because they forgot to put the tracking code on. It's like, oh, we forgot the tracking. So a little checklist for things like that. Make sure you don't miss really obvious things. Don't make a massive howler when you're, there's so many moving parts in migrations. Make sure you have the obvious stuff covered and make sure you have a checklist. Take little screenshots as you go through. Did we do this? Did we check the robots text is in place? Have we double checked it? Have we checked the sitemap's in place? Yeah, we got that. Okay. Does the 404 work? Does it actually return a 404 header on the new site and on the old site when we're going to migrate it over? Okay, right, great. All those kind of things. Double check it, screenshot it, because you'll be going through so many different things. You'll forget. You'll think, did I do that? I'm not sure. Get all that kind of stuff checked off. Have a checklist. Those are the things that will help you with that. Something that a lot of people forget is crawl your site before and after. You want to do that kind of before and after comparison. So having a crawl of your site before you think about doing any of the migrations and have that banked and saved away, stashed in a little hole lovely away, so you can check it after you've done the migration, and you can do that kind of before and after. That'll be a really helpful thing, and again, can help you find some howlers or mistakes that you've made, things that have been missed off, something that somebody forgot to switch over. You'll find all that kind of stuff in there as well. And then you can start to have some kind of checklist again from that. So work out what your 10 most valuable pages are, which are the ones that drive the most revenue, which are the ones that get the most traffic, which are the ones that have all those incoming links. Like when you're doing that kind of before and after check, when you're doing that big, going live on your new migration day, you don't want to be going through every single page in your site. So get yourself a little checklist of 10. So it's right, we're going to check these 10 pages because they're the high traffic ones. We're going to check these. If these work, probably everything else works. If these work, probably everything else. You can go and check in detail later, but those kind of checklists and those top 10s will really help you, and that kind of before and after with your crawling will really help. One of the things that often gets missed off is that kind of absolute versus relative. I've put it there, so checking absolute and relative URLs. Again, I've seen people mess this up because there's lots of times where you'll have absolute canonicals. You'll get developers that will be, they've got 101 things to worry about with a migration too, so they'll literally take dumps of the code. So they'll do a big copy and paste of your code and they'll stick it all over and they go, yeah, everything works great, lovely. And they'll have left all the canonicals in, pointing back to your old site. And you don't want that because then you're telling Google like all sorts of confusing mixed signals. And I've also then found people that, wrote old blog posts and they'll have literal URLs. So they'll say, to find out more about optimizing how great we are on our old domain, go to oldoptimizy.com. And I literally have that URL in the blog post or whatever that they wrote years and years ago, and that kind of thing gets a bit confusing. So make sure that you've got all those instances down where you've got absolute or relative URLs, where have you got them. Make sure you've got all those in place too. Then the last one I put in there is about sending clear signals to Google. So this is about sort of controlling the things you can control. So it would be lovely, like links. Everybody knows links are kind of important in SEO. Make sure that you can control the links that you are aware of. It would be great if you could just go out to all those sites that link to your old domain and say, hey, could you switch over to our new domain? But most of them won't bother doing that, and it's a real pain to have to go out and do that. But if you can control the ones that you can control, so there'll be lots of sites, again, that I've worked on in the past where they go, oh yeah, we migrated 3 months ago and we can't understand why Google's not picking it up. And you look at their social media profiles and all their social media profiles point to their old domain. And you look at their Google My Business listing and it points to their old domain. And you look at all their directory listings and all the things they've got in Yell or Hotfrog or wherever else it is they've got all these listings, and they're all pointing to their old domain. And it's like, well, why haven't you changed those over? You're sending really confusing signals to Google. If these are things that you as a business control, and you're saying, hey, Google, this is us on one site, and also Google, this is us on, you're not sending a clear signal there. So make it really clear to Google, like, right, this is us, we've moved, now we were here, now we're on this site instead. Make sure you can control all those things too. I don't want to go over my time because I'm aware that Joe's got the big, powerful all mute button. So there's a couple of quick things I wanted to drop in for some bonus tracks. So a friend of mine, Simon Cox, very smart SEO, wrote a really cool Google Data Studio thing that you can use. So if you Google Simon Cox, Google Data Studio migration, he wrote a really cool little Data Studio thing that you can, if you're switching over from one site to another, so you can put those things in and track as Google picks up one site migrating to another. And a chap called Jeff Luella wrote a really cool API in the Google Sheet thing. So he's thetechseo.com. If you find on his site, he's got a really cool thing where you can put in your old domain, and it uses the Wayback Machine to kind of crawl and pick out all the broken links from your old domains. and it will show up and it does a little status checker and goes, well, this one doesn't work, this is 404, this one's 301ing, this one's 301ing to a 404. It's an absolute lifesaver and save you loads of times if you're trying to pick out a migration that's gone wrong. That's me done.
Great. Well, that's perfect. You have loads of tips. Thank you. And hello to Claire that's joined, Sarah, Armando as well. And I'll pass over now to Chris, who will be giving us through some different tips from his experience of how many site migrations was it, Chris?
1 or 2. Well over 100 migrations of some kind. So soft touch, light touch, HTTPS server, etc. Yes, I still have hair. It is mine. We did joking say it was a wig, but it's not. So anyway, cool. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, so my top tips. So I've actually avoided going into the super technical ones. And actually, one of the things that really I found differentiated a good migration and a bad migration wasn't actually the best knowledge necessarily or being the best kind of technical SEO in that. Because so many times during a site migration, you don't actually have control of so much of that. So you can give the best recommendations, but if they're not implemented, then unfortunately that doesn't really add up to much. So my tip 1 is learn the project as well as the project manager. And fundamentally, this kind of feels like a slightly boring point. It's not necessarily a tech SEO one, but this is about being proactive. And if you understand the project that well, you can own your own space, but you also know when your inputs are expected. But also when others need to feed in. So you know where key milestones are and key dependencies. And the main reason by that, apart from just making you look really well organized, is you're not waiting for someone to bring an element to you for checking. An SEO in this process will often need to be checking off kind of visuals, dev site at certain points in the process, etc. And so often people don't come and say, oh, Mr. SEO, will you check now? Because they're often very busy and they probably don't want to wait for you to do it. So the reason why you're saying learn the project well is so you're on it. Do it in a good way. Don't be a pain, but don't let them forget, don't get missed out. Cool. So the next one, and again, this is a bit of a curveball maybe, is I found the biggest variable in the site migration process is often the organization size, not the CMS that's selected. So a lot of people get very passionate about certain platforms, and in the early stage of any project, people go for WordPress, don't go for WordPress, and it gets very kind of heated. However, I found that with the right development team and the right kind of project management, the CMS doesn't really make much difference. What has a bigger impact is the organizational size and the lines of communication, number of stakeholders, etc. So obviously the key one, more stakeholders equals more opinions, and opinions are just not actually that helpful during the site build process, because inevitably your recommendations get watered down, and then people, there's more chance that your milestones and your timelines are going to get really shrunk. So what I would say is, if you can, and this is not always an easy thing to do, depends when you've been brought into the process, is spend more time better briefing the CMO rather than worrying about your CMS. And I didn't just say that because it kind of sounds a bit overly convenient, but it really is quite useful if you can get in there right at the start and just get the CMO on your side and get them bought into what it is that you're doing. Cool. And then the final one, this is probably the biggest one, and actually you can kind of take this out of the site migration process and apply it to anything that we do, and it's set expectations early. And I can't stress that one enough, because throughout the planning stages of a site migration, you have project stakeholders. You have to make them aware of the impact of their decisions in those early stages. So when you're reviewing sitemaps, when you're reviewing target key terms, the extent of the 301 redirect mapping, content migration, all of these elements are going to severely impact what happens post migration. So, if you let all third parties and make them aware as soon as possible of your requirements, you can give them opportunity to raise issues at the start. So, for example, ask them about what is the framework they're building the website. Are they going to be using kind of JavaScript, or are they just going to be running straight, HTML, or what is the functionality? What are your requirements? Don't mention, oh, by the way, we can't launch this because it doesn't have the schema that we want, or none of the content will be indexable, because you may be totally right, but there's very little time that you can actually, help yourself on that. And I have a slightly visual example I guess it's not really an example. It's kind of it's an analogy. So I don't know how many of you have read Turn the Ship Around, but there's a concept in there called a little rudder far from the rocks. I don't think any of you are nuclear submarine captains, but if you are, I'd love to speak to you because it sounds really interesting. But effectively, the author says, really drills in this concept of, if you only need to give a little rudder if you're far away from the rocks to actually, make that change as needed. So in this example, we have an implausibly large cruise liner heading towards Cromer Pier. And it was only because the first time I used this example, I was in Norfolk, so I wanted to localize it for the audience there. But, if you see the pier coming soon enough, slight rudder, light turn, you quite easily miss the pier, as you can see there. So everyone gets to wave on the way past. Now, if you get close to the pier, i.e. closer to that deadline, and then you realize that there's a problem, well, you're limited as to what your solutions are, or your, not your solutions, but how you can manage that process. So first one is you try and steer. You try and make amends and kind of correct whatever you can, which in the real world, that's team working overtime, whether that's SEO, whether that's development, whether it's the client side. People have to bust their hump to get over this, and it's not very comfortable. Now, the other option is, so seamless, is you try and go, try and reverse, you try and backpedal, which is, more often than not making excuses or realigning expectations in terms of the analogy. There we go. Perfect. Realigning expectations. No, that was never going to work. Now, the third option is, okay, well, instead, let's evacuate the pier. It's going to crash. What's the damage limitation that we can do there? And again, in the real world, that's basically saying those keywords we wanted to target go into the second phase, or actually we can't retain all of this traffic because X, Y, and Z, which is quite an uncomfortable conversation to be having at the late stages, and very often becomes a last-minute scramble to minimize losses. However, the inevitable thing is, well, you hit the pier, the cotton candy sets on fire, and in the real world, that is, rankings tank post-launch. So no one wants this scenario. Cromer Pier doesn't deserve this. So what I would really stress in this is, if you're setting expectations early, if you're using a little rudder further away from the rocks or the pier, it'll stop this. So good communication and understanding the project will stop this. And they're my key top tips.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris.
Do we need to clarify that no peers were harmed during the making of this broadcast?
I think we should clarify that no peers were harmed at all during this broadcast or in the practice for the broadcast.
I may have harmed it. Just saying.
Thank you. I'm sure we've got some questions coming up after Marco's tip. So over to you, Marco.
Sure. So I would say my first tip is about the opportunity also that site migration is bringing. This is because when we do the benchmark phase in every migration, we evaluate, we assess each page, we assess each piece of content. So in my opinion, this will be like one of the best opportunities to keep very, very safe. The kind of like content is ranking very well, it's performing very well, but at the same time, like to discard, to merge, to find new solutions, but the content is not performing really, really well. So it's, I would say, we need to take an opportunity here because content can be really, really be a nice opportunity to be boosted in site migration contest as well. The number two is have a plan also for escalating issues. As Chris said, I would say we are more like into the organization in the project management here. But in my opinion, probably one of the best tips is about really find that point of contact, that person which is going to be always available to make damage control, to really help you if there is any issue. Talking about person like in the development team, person in the marketing team, which is going to be really, really helpful if anything is really coming up. Is the second tip. The third one is about PPC. So we're getting a bit out of the SEO context. But in my opinion, also, we know that from migration from the first web, for example, we're talking about replatforming. There is always a gap for Google to pick all the changes when site migration is happening. So it's probably a good idea to plan in advance a PPC contingency budget. You can ask your PPC team to push on existing bids for existing keywords or create separate keywords. You can extract, for example, the keywords, the organic keywords, which are performing very well from an e-commerce, from a revenue perspective. And this is going to be really, really helpful, especially if you got this gap, which can last from 2 days to even for a week or even 2 weeks. So this one is another thing to consider. Fourth and last tip is try also with working together with the business, try to find the best time to launch the site migration. What does it mean? For example, if you make lots of revenue at Christmas, try to plan very much in advance. We're talking about September or October. And obviously, if we're talking about the day of the week, try to plan as much as possible for Monday and Tuesday. I've already seen in my experience a site migration launch on a Friday that really, really didn't go well because we had to do overtime. Some people had to work on a Saturday. So no migration is absolutely flawless. So try to plan in advance and try to plan. If there is any delay, try to make time if you can.
Great, thank you very much, Marco. Loads of tips there. So, as I said, we have a Q&A. We've got lots of people joined. Hello, Christina. She's joined. Azim Digital, logged in as Azim Digital. If you guys have any questions, let us know. I think there is a lot of comments. It's great.
Can I ask a question while you're finding them?
Yes.
Does Earl Grey and chocolate hobnobs really go together?
I don't really like Earl Grey, so I can't really say that.
But on the other hand, chocolate hobnobs go with everything.
I like them both. I mean, I'm willing to try. I just saw that in the live chat right at the start. So Andrew looked petrified that I was going to ask an actual question then.
Oh, loads of comments there. Let me just bring all of us back to the chat. So we can also follow up with you on your Twitter handles, Optimizy, Chris Green 87, and Marco Bonomo SEO if we have any other questions. Okay, great. So I think we've got one in the chat.
Okay. So even if you get everything executed perfectly in your migration, should you still expect a small percentage drop in organic visibility?
Who's going to say it depends? Go on.
You have to ring the bell.
It varies. Could we say that?
In my experience, small, relatively, by small I mean under 10,000 pages, small, simplistic kind of websites. Yes, you can absolutely migrate without expecting it. But coming back to what Marco said, setting expectations early and planning for what happens if it doesn't work, i.e. if someone does mess something up in the latter stages, that's worth it. But no, I'm not a fan of the expect to lose 10 to 15% of organic traffic because you're migrated, especially if you're a large retailer. That's a lot of traffic, and that doesn't have to happen, because it lets project teams get sloppy if that's the expectation.
In my experience, there's definitely flux. Google tends to, when you move around, then Google tends to seem to have a bit of a slightly random element to things sometimes. Like I've seen migrations, where it switches over from one to the other and it goes beautifully seamlessly, and one traffic for the old site goes down perfectly as the other site comes up, and it's all wonderful and everybody pats each other on the back. And I've seen other migrations where everything seems to be done rightly, but it seems to take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and you're kind of sitting there thinking, why is Google still crawling the old one? And it's painful and annoying, and everybody's looking at the SEO people going like, you guys said that this would be fine, what's going on? And it just takes time sometimes. But that kind of flux, you shouldn't be losing traffic, particularly massive amounts in there along the way. You should be getting it to one site or the other. Even if Google is showing stuff in the search results that links to your old site, if you got the redirects working properly, then they should be ending up on a new site anyway. So you shouldn't be losing, hemorrhaging money in traffic. You should be, if you do a migration properly, then you'll see some flux and some bump in the road. And like, Chris and Marco have covered, you want to kind of prepare your C-suite and executives and that kind of stuff for that flux, but you shouldn't be, saying, oh, well, we're going to migrate and that's going to wipe 20% off our traffic.
So what about Friday afternoons? You've seen some Fridays
Don't do it.
being mentioned here.
Nope. Just no.
Marco, do you want to say that one? That was your one, wasn't it?
Yeah. I had this experience, and to be honest, first and last.
Yeah.
Does that mean that next time you're just going to just walk out? Is that going to be it?
Yeah, coming back to this question, I would say that probably it's probably just a matter of time. As Andrew said, that if you do things right. Probably you got not much to worry. So it's even if you got a retroactive migration, there is always a way, pretty much always a way to fix things, because it's just a matter of how good you are at picking the right pages and all the right, how you deal with the projects, the team, and the CMS and everything.
Okay, great. Actually, Michael asks Andrew, Michael Chidsey, if you could tweet the Google Data Studio with a Wayback Machine post.
So I stuck them in the chat on YouTube just now, but yeah, absolutely. I'll stick them on Twitter afterwards as well. And I can tag the appropriate authors properly too, so they get the credit.
I had a question for you, Chris, or anyone really who's obviously had lots of experience with site migration. Perhaps what was the best experience? And in terms of best, you can say it was like no visibility or no, I don't know, bad indexing. But what was the best? If you can say the client's name. If not, then if you can say the reason why it was the best.
So the best one I've ever had is well, it was a couple of years back. It was, I don't know if I can say the client's name actually, so I'll assume that I can't for the moment. But basically, that was it was a mess when we approached it. And actually, I'll prefix that with saying any site migrations that I've done that have gone really well have been on sites that are currently kind of poor. My least favorite migrations are when you come to a website that's actually ranking really well and performing really well, because, well, putting it simply, you have more to lose. But the key point really is it was a Joomla site that had to go into WordPress, had all kinds of cannibalization problems. The keyword targeting was wrong. The site structure was poor. There was a lot of thin duplicate content. And effectively, throughout the course of the build, we corrected all of that and effectively added like 40,000 redirects in to untangle the mess of that. So we kind of wrote some scripts that would actually manage all of the process for the known redirects, but also would handle all the unknowns, and it had some best case matching based on previous content and matching it to new current content. So that process worked really well, and that in tandem, the client was doing a lot of active PR at the same time. So a lot of new content, a lot of untangling the old technical problems and building it on a far quicker, far better site. Their visibility was pretty much up sort of 150 to 200% each year for the following like 3 years. And they're still flying pretty high now. I encountered them. Their marketing manager approached me at Brighton SEO about 5 years ago, and they're still flying. So that's unequivocally the best one I've ever worked on. Should I tell you about one that didn't go so well, just as a counterpoint? Again, sure. I won't mention the names, but I had a client who was at the top of their niche for the kind of money terms, and within 2.5 weeks of migrating, they tanked out and dropped to page 2. And I've never looked so hard for a source of a problem in my life. You know, we went into log files, we checked and double checked all of the 301s, we went through all of the 404 logging, we were looking at who was hitting the website, where they were going. The content was identical, and in the other situations we'd added more into new places, and we just couldn't work it out. We had to chalk that one down to, you know, potentially something else happening previously, you know, to their link graph, or, you know, potentially an algorithm change. But I mean, myself and 3 or 4 other SEOs checked it. We couldn't see what had happened, but unfortunately, in the client's eyes, that was a botched migration. I've only had one of those to that degree. They are back now, 18 months later, and the most recent Broadcore brought them back. So I'm assuming it was potentially an algorithm hit at the time of migration. But how can you tell the stakeholders that that's happened, and how can you untangle the two? I don't know. That was fun. I still have hair.
I've got a question quickly for Marco. So you've kind of talked a bit about when is not a good time to launch a site migration, but when is a good time?
Well, it really depends on the business, on the nature of the business, I would say, because
you said it depends.
My bad. So in a few words, basically, it's obviously if your business seasonal, you try to plan very much in advance and do like off season. This is like one of the best things you can do. Obviously, also you need to plan also for possible delays. So let's say that if your top season is Christmas, try to plan the migration like in January, January, February, because you need to be clear the way very, very much in advance.
Can I chip in an idea on that too?
Sure, the more the merrier.
One of the things that I try to advise clients that are migrating is that migrating is a really big change. So try and have as few other things changing at that time as you can. If you're about to launch some massive new product, or you're about to gut your blog and tear out all the content and rewrite it all, or you're about to rebrand and change the name of the company and stuff as well, then maybe migrating it at the same time is a little bit too much to bite off in one go. If you can kind of chunk those things up and do them at separate times, obviously business needs and stuff come first, but don't bite off more than you need to unless you really, really need to. Migrating is a big deal. Try and have as few moving parts as possible and make your lives and your developers' lives easier.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to our speakers today, Chris, Andrew, and Marco. We will be back tomorrow, the same time, 4 p.m., and we're going to have Pinar Unzal and Laurent Bourrier talk about keyword research and why it is still important. If anybody would like to be a speaker, please contact Kerry. We have some slots arranged. We have some vacancies next week for some technical SEO. We have some link building and different tips, really nice actionable tips to share. So thank you all for being here today. We'll be tweeting out the video later on, and we'll be uploading the slide shares as well, and to have a blog post to go out. So thanks everyone for joining us, and see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. British summertime with some tea or cake and coffee.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.